Recently, a friend of mine acquired a couple of these used bourbon barrels from a local distillery, and he asked me if I would be interested in converting them each into a bar for adult beverages. One to keep and one for a gift. Well, I don't usually do commission work unless it intrigues me and it's something I've never done before. And this definitely foots the bill. So, I think I'm going to do it, and I want you to come along with me so you can experience it with me. It's going to be a lot of work, so we better get started. The rings on these barrels were extremely corroded and rusty, one of them being rustier than the other. But I spent a considerable amount of time sanding and grinding these just to get the rust off. Eventually I took this process outside because it was creating such a dust cloud in the shop. Once I had the barrel rings clean, it was time to lay out exactly the spot where I was going to cut the opening. So that I didn't get confused, I was using blue painter's tape to mark that location. I made some little supports that I screwed down to the bench to keep the barrel from rolling while I'm working on it. I'm using my calipers to scratch locations for screws on all the bands. Barrel staves are held together with the tension of the bands, but once I cut the band for the opening, the staves will fall apart if they aren't screwed to the band. These screws are zinc plated, so they're way too shiny for our project. I'm going to use this liquid gun blue to turn them dark. This process is almost like magic. They instantly blacken as you drop them in the liquid. When that batch is done, I drain off the gun blue into a clean cup to use for the next batch. Then I dump the screws into a cup of water to rinse them off, and after draining them, the most important step is to dry them off with the crusty armpit of an old undershirt. You can see what a difference that makes. It took approximately 100 screws per barrel, so you can imagine how long this took. To cut our opening, I first started by piercing it with a multi-tool. Then I was able to get a saw in to cut the rest of the way. I quickly learned that a handsaw is not the best option and switched to the reciprocating saw. It goes a whole lot quicker. Next we got to cut the bands where they cross over the opening. Each time one of them released its tension, I jumped. And then the barrel staves just basically fall right out. It was at this point in the build that the smell of bourbon from inside the barrel smacked me harder than Will Smith, and the shop smelled like bourbon for a week. Next we got to cut the barrel bands where they meet the opening. I took them outside to do that because I was afraid all the sparks might set some sawdust on fire. You can see the charred inside of the barrel, so the next step is scraping as much loose off with a putty knife as we can. And as I looked back at the slowed down footage, I saw thousands of ghostly orbs leaving the barrel. If I didn't know any better, I'd say this whiskey barrel once was full of spirits. And now with the shop back, we're cleaning up all the loose debris that we scraped off. For the shelves inside the barrels, we're using 1-inch oak treads. The first step is to rip the bull nose off of all of them. And then after cleaning the edges up on the joiner, we edge glue them together. Once they come out of the clamps, using my beam compass, I draw the diameter of the circle we need and roughly cut it out with the jigsaw. I'm careful to stay away from the line because we're going to refine it with our homemade circle cutting jig and a straight cutting bit on the router. We do this in several plunges, taking a little each time. Then we put a round over on both sides. We're putting several coats of gloss polyurethane on all surfaces of the barrel. On the barrel head, we're being especially vigilant to put multiple coats because this will be the bar surface and will take a lot of wear. On the inside, we've put several coats of spray poly to seal in the char. Then we glue and screw a block to the bottom, and that props our bottom shelf up just below the lip of the opening. We're going to nail and glue this into place. On our middle shelf, we've attached some black angle brackets to the bottom, and using some temporary supports for spacing, we screw them into the outer edge of the barrel. And that brings us to the finished product. These things turned out great. That gloss polyurethane really makes the wood and the metal bands pop. On the inside, we've stained our shelves to more closely match the color of the outside of the barrel. And then our barrel heads, with all those coats of poly, have perfectly preserved all the maker's marks and history of these barrels. You can even see the whiskey line on the edge of the stave where it soaked through as it was aging. Well, that was a lot of work, but these things turned out great. I can't wait to take them to my friend's house tomorrow and give them to him. He hasn't seen them yet. He's going to be super excited, I'm sure. I thank you for following along. I thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you've subscribed, I thank you for that. And if you haven't subscribed, if you think I've earned it, I would appreciate the subscription. And lastly, why don't you leave me a comment? Let me know what you think about these. I really appreciate it. And I guess I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.